Jesus' name. Amen. Deuteronomy chapter 31, really on the cusp of the end of Moses' life. Just a little while after we read of Numbers 27. In verse 7 then, in front of all the congregation, in front of all of the people, in front of all Israel, Deuteronomy 31 verse 7, we read that Moses called to Joshua, said unto him in sight of all Israel, Be strong and of a good courage. Notice the detail. For thou must go with this people unto the land which the Lord hath sworn unto their fathers to give them, and thou shalt cause them to inherit it. There was an old emperor who had no children, and so he became concerned about who would succeed him on the throne, and he decided that he would gather boys together, boys from the empire, and he would set them a test to ascertain who would be the most faithful amongst them, and whoever the most faithful amongst them was, well then he would be the heir, the next heir to the throne, and he would train him up and so on. And so he gave each of these boys a plant pot with obviously soil in it and a seed. And he gave them one simple instruction: go away, water this plant pot, of course, with the seed in it, and we'll come back next year and we'll look at the end result, and we will go from there, essentially. So, of course, the boys did this. They looked after this plant pot with the supposed seed in it for a year, and they all came back with their plant pots the next year. Every boy, bar one, had a nice, lovely, blooming flower or budding plant in the plant pot, all except one boy. And he just had the same old plant pot that he had been given the previous year. And they began to mock the little boy. I'm sure you can imagine, oh, well, look at your pot. There's nothing in it. Look at my brilliant plant pot, and so on. The emperor turned to the little boy who it seemed there had nothing happened in his plant pot, and he said this. He said, You, boy, are the successor to my throne. I gave you all ruined seeds that I had cooked and boiled in water, but you all used your own seeds to try and impress me, except this boy. Honesty, truthfulness, courage, and integrity are the qualities I expect in my successor, and only this boy succeeded in the test. Hence I proclaim that he shall be my successor. Simple test, but it told an awful lot about the young boy. And folks, when we think about Joshua, we see someone who, on the surface from Deuteronomy 31 and even in Numbers 27, you get the impression that all of a sudden he's just burst on the scene, and Moses turns to Joshua in the sight of all the people and sets him apart to lead the people into the land of promise, into the land of Canaan. But that's not what happens, because as we're going to see, when you really read the book of Exodus and Numbers especially, and then on into Deuteronomy, you see someone who had proved himself faithful, proved himself as an honest individual, an individual of integrity, so that when the time came for Moses to realize that he must now hand over or pass over the baton to someone else, well, Joshua was God's man for the hour. There are slight differences in Numbers 27 and Deuteronomy 31. Numbers 27, you have more of the characteristics kind of grouped together of Joshua. And then you have what I would describe essentially as the formal setting apart or laying on of hands, or ordination, if you like, of Joshua, ordination in type. And then Deuteronomy 31, you really have Moses coming towards the very end of his life, realizing that time is quickly ebbing out. He's 120, you read of that in verse 1 in Deuteronomy 31. And really what he's saying is formally, from now in Deuteronomy 31, now Joshua is to lead the people, and I will disappear off the scene. Now, Numbers 27 is an interesting chapter because, for a variety of reasons. It gives many of the characteristics of Joshua grouped together, as I've said. But Numbers 26, 27, and 28 are chapters of transition for God's people. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, in chapter 26 of Numbers, you have the new congregation being numbered. You must remember that the people that went through the wilderness, they were not the people who entered into Canaan. No, it was their children. God had made that clear, that Moses was going to perish in the wilderness, and that generation was going to perish in the wilderness with him. So what you have in Numbers 26, in the first half of Numbers 27 up to verse 11, you have the numbering of the new congregation. And then in Numbers 27, verses 12 to 23, the end of Numbers 27, you have the new commander of the new congregation. And then in Numbers chapter 28, you have new capacities for this new commander and the new congregation. What do I mean by that? Well, the offerings that were stipulated in Exodus, they are essentially added to in Numbers in terms of what would happen at special times. The weekly offerings, the monthly offerings, even the special festival times, and the even yearly offerings as well. Added to, why, you might ask? Well, added to because they're going to a land which has far more capacity for crop growth, for various other things, than the wilderness that they've been in for 40 years. I mean, it really is hard to kind of come up with various offerings, grain offerings, etc., when you're in a wilderness and there really are no crops. So you think about this. Numbers 26, 27, 28, very appropriate for our congregation, because you have a new congregation, a new, virtually speaking, group of people. You have a new commander, and you have new capacities for that new people. And yet here we have, sandwiched in the midst of it all, Moses highlighting Joshua as God's man to succeed him as the leader, who of course is going to lead the people over the Jordan and then into Canaan. And you read about that then in the book of Joshua. Chapter 28, verse 15, we read, or 27, verse 15, we read, Moses spake to the Lord, saying, Let the Lord, the God of the spirits of all flesh, set a man over the congregation. So here we find he's now praying, and he's doing this in front of all Israel, all of the people. And he's saying, Lord, you set the man over the congregation. And the rest of the chapter, in Deuteronomy 31 as well, we find out why God set this man over the congregation. Because as I've said, God has been preparing him for 40 years, in fact, throughout all of his life. Folks, we learn in these chapters that nothing stays the same forever. In life, things are subject to change. People come, people go. The makeups of bodies, it changes. There is movement there. There is, just like the people of God here. I mean, the individuals who went through the wilderness were not the individuals who went into Canaan and conquered the land. The individual who led them was not the individual who brought them through into Canaan. It is the same. It's the same with people, and it's the same with leaders. Things change. Ecclesiastes 3 tells us that for everything there is a time, and for everything there is a season. And we must remember this, folks, because God only gives you a small window before then, like Moses, you go into glory and disappear off the scene of time. None of us are indispensable. None of us folks are here forever. Whether it's leader, whether it's lady, whether it's captain, so to speak, or whether it's congregation. None of us are here forever, folks. And therefore, we must, like Moses, and then as we're going to see like Joshua, endeavor to be faithful where God places us, when God places us, with what God gives us to serve him. Moses' successor. And I think this is a very interesting study, and a very necessary study, as we think about this life of Moses, this meekest of man. Firstly, I want you to see here from Deuteronomy 31, the realization necessitating Moses' successor. The realization necessitating Moses' successor. Moses realizes a certain things that necessitate him coming to the conclusion, it's time that I step back and that I hand it over to someone else. He realized his frailty. Deuteronomy 31 verse 2, he said to them, I am 120 years old this day. So it was his birthday. I can no more go out and come in. Also the Lord hath said unto me, thou shalt not go over this Jordan. Here's Moses. He's on the very cusp of Canaan. It nearly seems that where he is in Deuteronomy anyway, that he can nearly see Canaan in the distance. You know, a little bit like some places in Northern Ireland, you can nearly see the Isle of Man from a distance, like the North Coast or somewhere like that. It's nearly as if he can see the Jordan and Canaan in a distance. He's right on the cusp of Canaan. And yet he's very honest with himself here, isn't he? He realizes his frailty. I am 120 years old today, this day. I can no more go out and come in. He's essentially saying, I can no longer lead. I have not the capacity to lead this people anymore. Now, you might be thinking, well, what about Deuteronomy 34 in his deathbed? When he says his strength did not abate him at 120. Is there a contradiction here? There's no contradiction here. God strengthened him right up until the end. But there is another sense in which Moses here, he understands that his time has come to an end. Now, there are various other factors at play here, because if you look again at the second part of verse 2, the Lord said to me, thou shalt not go over this Jordan. And there's a reference to it, we have read it. The Lord said to him, whenever he stroked the rock instead of spoke to the rock, we looked at that a few weeks ago, the Lord said, you'll not go into Canaan. You'll not inherit the land. And he said that concerning the older generation as well. So here is Moses, and he has this realization that on the day of 120, the day of his birthday, he is no longer able to do what he once did, and as they're on the cusp of Canaan, he feels and he senses that this is the time. And folks, this is a very healthy attitude to have in God's work. As I mentioned, none of us are here forever. There is a time when God calls, there is a time when God furnishes us with help and with enablement, but there also is that natural time when leaders step down and someone else takes the place. Now, there are various reasons for that. It may be because the Lord makes it clear to the leader or to the individual. It may be because of the natural process of time, because of age, because of health. Various reasons. But the point, folks, here is this, is that Moses realized that whilst God had called him to do work, that work was now done. He realized his frailty. He realized that he was not indispensable. And he passed the baton on. There's others in Scripture who understood this about life. The Apostle Paul, of course, was always the eternal optimist, and he said in 2 Corinthians 4, verse 16, though his outward man perished, his inward man was renewed day by day. He was saying that outwardly my body is deteriorating, but inwardly my strength is being renewed. There's a healthy dose of realism there, isn't there? The Lord strengthening me every day. But the outward man is not what it once was. Peter said towards the end of his life, didn't he, in 2 Peter 1 verse 14, that he would shortly put off his earthly tabernacle. Shortly my time is coming to an end. So there was a realization here. He realized his frailty, but I also want you to see that he realized his responsibility. Deuteronomy 31 verse 2, he said to them, 120 years old this day, I can no more go out and come in. The Lord has said to me, thou shalt not go over this Jordan. Moses realizes here that he has a responsibility to pass on the baton to a younger individual who would lead the people to Canaan. He realized that this needs to be done because they need to be prepared. Canaan is going to be hard. Canaan is going to be difficult. I mean, the wilderness was hard, obviously. It was a different kind of hard. The daily grind of just surviving wilderness life. But Canaan was difficult. They had to conquer literally a land. The Canaanites. They were giants. That's why they've been in the wilderness for 40 years, because they recognized they were a hard and tough enemy. And so Moses, he realizes that now is the time. Now is the time to lay hands. Now is the time to visibly make it clear in the sight of the people that Joshua is the man to lead them. Now, he didn't just do this on the whim. Numbers 27 verse 16, we read, let the Lord, the God of the spirits of all flesh, set a man over the congregation. So he's praying about this all the while. Lord, you choose this man. Lord, you raise up this man. Lord, you make it clear this man who is to replace me. It's not as if he just thinks, well, Joshua will do or Caleb will do. Caleb, I believe, was the other candidate, and what a candidate he would have been to lead the people. Much older, much more experienced. We'll say more about Caleb. But I want you to see here that he not only saw his responsibility to the leader, but he saw the responsibility to the people that he is currently leading. You think about Moses and his perspective. He's 120. He's seen it all. He's been there. He's done that. He has the old generation, which are going to perish with him in the wilderness. But he has their children, potentially even their grandchildren, the new generation. Now, Moses could have been very callous, couldn't he? He could have washed his hands of the new generation. Nothing to do with me after all. They're going into Canaan. They've got a new leader. We'll just let Joshua instruct them and deal with them and direct them. But here, in the very cusp at the end of his life, what does Moses do? In Deuteronomy 31, look at verses 9 on to 13. Look at verse 12 especially. Gather the people together, the men, the women, the children, even the stranger that's within your gates, that they may hear and they may learn. He charges the priest to read the law to them every 7 years, to gather everybody together, men, women, children, even the stranger. And every 7 years, at the observation of certain feasts, the Feast of Tabernacles, they were to have the law read to them. You see, he not only realizes his responsibility to the new leader, he realizes there is a responsibility as of yet to those whom he's leading, even though he's not leading them directly, you might say. He has this responsibility still to teach the generation to come. Older folk in the congregation here, that's a generation you never shirk until the day God calls you home. It may not be literally through the lips, but it is through the life. It's very easy to say, to those who are of a certain age in the congregation here, very easy for you to say, well, let the young ones get on with it. You have a responsibility, child of God. A responsibility to even parents, to the children, to be an example. To be an example in prayer, to being an example in life. To do what you can to further and to strengthen the teaching of the Word of God to the little ones and to the young. We're not just simply to say, well, that's nothing to do with me. If Moses on his deathbed at 120 felt this, then you should feel this too. The Apostle Paul wrote 2 Timothy, and coming to the end of his life, he realized there needs to be this succession. And so what does he do, encouraging Timothy? He actually, in 2 Timothy 2 verse 2, you read of 4 generations. Paul is such a visionary, even near his death. He has 4 generations in mind. Think about the words carefully. 2 Timothy 2 verse 2, the things that thou have heard of me, there's one generation, among many witnesses. The same commit thou, so he's speaking to Timothy, so there's another generation. Paul teaching Timothy. And what does he tell Timothy to do? Commit thou to faithful men. There's a 3rd generation. I'm teaching you, Timothy. Timothy, you're teaching the rising generation. And what are you to teach the rising generation? 2 Timothy 2 verse 2. Commit thou to faithful men who shall be able to teach others also. There is 4 generations Paul has in mind as he instructs Timothy. 4 generations. Are you thinking, child of God, about 4 generations from now? Have you that vision to see what the Church of Christ could be like in 4 generations in a positive way? If you invest in the young and invest in those who are learning the ways of God. That's what Moses did here. In the 1900s, someone did a study on the descendants of Jonathan Edwards, the great revivalist preacher in New England, the man who preached sinners in the hands of an angry God. And he was known for his piety. Him and his wife, Sarah Edwards, who hardly gets mentioned. Out of his posterity, 100 became ministers or missionaries. 13 became university presidents. 100 became lawyers. 60 became doctors. 86 were state senators in the state. I'm not going to say all of them were Christians, but it's very obvious that he saw this and he felt this, what we're looking at here. The passing on of the baton to the younger, but at the same time, encouraging them, instructing them, showing them example. The realization necessitating Moses' successor. I want you to see secondly here the preparation of Moses' successor. The preparation of Moses' successor. And we really see this in Deuteronomy, or in Numbers, chapter 27. Numbers 27. As I said, Deuteronomy 31, it almost seems that Joshua just appears, and in Numbers 27 even as well. But God had been forming Joshua for years, for decades, to get him to this point where Deuteronomy 31 and Numbers 27, Moses essentially says, this is the man. Lays his hands upon him. As I was thinking about this week, I remember the quote of Winston Churchill whenever he was first elected as Prime Minister to lead the nation in its very difficult time during the war. You know what he said as he was elected Prime Minister? All my life was building up to this moment in time. All my life was building up to this moment in time. If you were to ask Joshua in Deuteronomy 31, I think he would feel exactly the same way. All of his life was building up to this moment in time where he would be appointed as the successor. Now, what was it that made Joshua the ideal candidate, even more ideal than Caleb? Well, we know that he was one of the 12 elders leading Israel, so he already had a position of authority, you might say, in Israel. He represented the tribe of Ephraim whenever, of course, they went to spy out the land of Canaan, and him and Caleb brought back that positive report, unlike the other 10. The first time we really see Joshua in action is Exodus chapter 17. You remember the great battle with Amalek, and Moses and Aaron are up on the mountain praying. What is happening? Well, there's a battle going on with Amalek below. Now you read of Joshua, he was the one who was appointed to lead that essentially untrained group of soldiers, and not only that, but lead them into victory. He proved himself with the opportunity that God had given to him. Joshua's opportunity, Joshua's humility. A few chapters back, Numbers 11:28, Joshua is described as Moses' serpent. And what you really see when you read Exodus and especially Numbers, you find Moses had an assistant, if you like. Joshua was his servant. Anything he needed, Joshua was always there. You think of that time, for example, when he was up the mountain. There were times when only Moses was up the mount. Did you know there were times there was Moses and Joshua up the mount? You think of that time, is it chapter 32 and 33 of Exodus, where the people grieved the Lord, danced before the golden calf. And what did Moses do in response? He erected, not the tabernacle, but a temporary tent of meeting so that he could seek the Lord. And he did that, and the glory came, and he returned to the Lord. Or the people returned to the Lord, Who was at the door the whole time? The door of that little tent? Joshua. His dependability as well. Numbers 11:28. He answered and said, My Lord Moses forbid them. Whenever Moses was in this tabernacle, seeking God, there were two that raised themselves up amongst the congregation, and Joshua felt that they were false prophets, and he immediately reported this honestly back to Moses. Of course, Moses said, would God that all the Lord's people prophesy, but nonetheless he did the right thing. He was dependable. Think of his vitality, and what I mean by that is his vision. The other 10 elders, they went and they saw exactly what Joshua saw. But they said, no, it's too hard. But Joshua, yes, Caleb, but Joshua was a man of vision. A man of vision. He saw, yes, the hurdles, the obstacles, but he saw them as obstacles that could be overcome, armed with the promise of God. He was a man with a vision. His spirituality, Numbers 27 here, verse 18. He was a man in whom the Spirit of God was. Joshua, was, as we would say, it was chalk and cheese between him and Moses. Totally different kettle of fish. Moses, it seems, was the big intellect. He was this kind of towering, Goliath-like kind of a character. He was the man outwardly. You would think, there's a leader. Joshua was the exact opposite. A meek individual, a mild individual. In many ways, if you were hand-picking the successor, you would probably have picked Caleb, much more like Moses. But that was not God's choice. And the question might be asked, well, why was Caleb? Caleb, he seems, especially in the detail where the reporting of this, the promised land and all, Caleb seems to be the one that takes the fore. Why was Caleb not appointed? Numbers 27:17, I believe, tells us why. Speaking of Joshua, he may go in before them and lead them out, which may bring them in, that the congregation of the Lord be not as sheep which have no shepherd. He had the heart of the shepherd. And he had the heart of the shepherd in a way that it seems Caleb didn't. Caleb was much more externally qualified, I believe. I don't think I'm wrong in saying that. Joshua was much more ordinary. Nothing really stands out about Joshua, except the one important key fact, that he was God's man. God's man for the people. And folks, we must learn this as well. No two leaders are the same. No two elders are the same. No two ministers are the same. No two deacons are the same. No two whatever. No two individuals are the same. No two, even think about it, no two moderators are the same when you think about the leading and guiding and the directing of a denomination. Every man is different. And every individual is different in the service of God. And every individual has strengths, and every individual has weaknesses. And folks, that's all part of God's plan for his church. This is true of us all, whether we're sheep, whether we're shepherd, whether we're leaders, whether we're not, we are all different. And folks, the point is really here is this for you, is that no matter where you fall in this, you recognize that yes, you are different, but you serve the Lord in spite of the differences. It is very easy to say, well, I cannot, or well, I'm not, it seems, as externally qualified as maybe somebody else. But whilst man looks on the outward appearance, God looks on the heart. And we see that in the choice of David. And we see that in the choice of Joshua. It really is amazing. He was a totally different personality to Moses. Joshua chapter 10, he just speaking of Joshua, it speaks of Joshua and his faithfulness, and it just sums up Joshua there as much of the land has been conquered. And we read there that Joshua left nothing undone of all that the Lord had commanded him. There were times when Moses was commanded to do things and he didn't do it. We saw that a few weeks ago. He was commanded to speak to the rock, but he smoked the rock. But Joshua, it seems, whenever he was given an instruction from the Lord of heaven himself, it seemed he followed that instruction to a T, no deviation. He did all that the Lord commanded him to do. And we see this here. Yes, not the big personality that Moses was. I believe Joshua was not that. But nonetheless, he did a sterling work in leading the people. And it's the same with you folks. Don't accentuate things that the world accentuates in terms of doing the service and the work of God. It's all about the internal. God will qualify you in due time. He will give you the strength. He will give you the capacity. If you are God's individual to do that particular task or work, then God will equip you. And that's what we see here in Deuteronomy chapter 31. Very quickly, the realization, the preparation, the consolation for Moses' successor. Look at Deuteronomy 31, verses 7 and 8. And this is a very intimate occurrence, by the way, folks. Here's Moses in his deathbed. He's literally now saying to the man, to Joshua, look, the baton's now handed over to you, and it's in front of everyone. Oh, to be a fly in the wall in that conversation. Well, here we have it. Look at verse 7 of Deuteronomy 31. Moses called to Joshua, said to him in the sight of all Israel, be strong and of a good courage. Thou must go with this people to the land which the Lord has sworn to their fathers to give them. Thou shalt cause them to inherit it. And the Lord, verse 8, he it is that doth go before thee. He'll be with you. He'll not fail thee, neither forsake thee. Fear not, neither be dismayed. Now, in verse 3 of this chapter, Moses moves to encourage the people and remind the people, the new generation, the Lord's going to be with you as you cross over Jordan. But now he turns his attention in verses 7 and 8 to the new leader, to the new commander. And I mean, this must have really been, Joshua's standing on the shoulders of a giant here. This is a man who he's watched lead 2 million people for 40 years. And all of a sudden, Moses turns to Joshua in front of everyone and says, Joshua, you are the man. Take this position now. Verse 7, thou must go with this people. Now look again at how he encouraged him. He encouraged him by simply doing this. This would have been a great encouragement for Joshua. It's one thing for various processes to happen. It's another thing for the previous man to say, look, you are God's man. This makes it absolutely clear to Joshua and to the people that you, Joshua, are taking the responsibility. Not Caleb. This would have been done in the presence of Caleb. You, Joshua. You think about it as well. Think of what he says in verse 7. Thou shalt cause them to inherit it. Now, you and I know that it's God who's going to give the victory as they go to Canaan and as they conquer Canaan. But Moses, in couching it in this language of verse 7, that you're going to cause them to inherit it, what he is saying is that by the Lord helping you, you're going to lead this people. And the way Moses just phrases it shows 120 years of experience, does it not? He just reminds him, yes, the Lord will help you, but it will be under your jurisdiction, Joshua. Be under your leadership. And then verse 8, he gives him this wonderful promise. The Lord will go before you. It's the Lord that's going to make this crooked path straight and this rough way smooth. Do you know what Moses is encouraging Joshua with? What Paul encouraged the church at Corinth with in 2 Corinthians 6 verse 1, workers together with him. You're the man, Joshua. The Lord has set you apart. The Lord has made this obvious. You've proved yourself in so many other ways, smaller ways. And you're now, by the help and grace of God, going to see what I never saw accomplished. Cross over the Jordan, miraculously. Oh, Moses saw the Red Sea part. Joshua's going to see something similar happen, is he not? The Jordan, it's going to part. They're going to walk over it. Joshua chapter 3. They're going to keep their distance from the Ark of the Covenant, and they're going to pass over as on dry land, just as the former generation had experienced as they walked through the Red Sea. The same thing would happen to this new generation. And that would encourage them that as the Lord was with our fathers or our grandparents or our forefathers, so he will be with us. Folks, there's so much encouragement here, is there not? For our congregation. I trust that you can see the parallels. I trust that you can join the dots. Folks, people come and people go, but God's work continues. And God's work can grow and advance. We need not live in the past, folks, and say, what is the point? Because we're being shown here that yes, the work was very different, but God prospered the work nonetheless. And may God do that here. May God bind us together, and may God set us ablaze and go forward. And yes, we might not see the Red Sea part, but let's see the Jordan part, folks. Because I believe this is what Moses is just preparing Joshua and the people to see. Yes, in all of our transitions, in all of our coming, in all of our going, in all of the changes to positions, etc., in all of the changes of people, God blesses and God prospers and God furthers his work if you and I are willing to walk by faith and not by sight with him. F.B. Meyer says there's no work to which God calls us for which he is not fully prepared to qualify us. God calls us to this work. God calls us to this generation. God calls us to serve for such a time as this, folks. Not 40 years ago and not 40 years from now. Right here, right now. Let's go forward. God promises he will qualify us as he was with a former generation and former leaders. So he will be with us and current leaders and even on into the future. Moses' successor. May God bless these few thoughts to our hearts and lives this morning. Let's close our service this morning by singing the words of 558, please. 558. Sovereign ruler of the skies, ever gracious, ever wise, all my times are in thy hand. All events at thy command. All events are at the command of God, control of God. 558. Let's stand, please, to sing.